Okay, hello and welcome to our BI webcast series for 2013. This is the start of what should be a great winter and spring for BI sessions here at msdynamicsworld.com. I'm Jason Gumpert, and joining us today for this event is Cristian Nicola of DynamicsBIGuide.com. Christy is a Dynamics ERP veteran and a returning speaker for us. Christy has expertise on all sorts of BI challenges for Dynamics customers, anything from Excel-based solutions up through a wide range of specialized packages. So we're really pleased to have him back. And as we get started, I just want to add that we do invite you to add your feedback and questions throughout Christy's presentation. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can use the chat feature or the Q&A feature that you see on the right of the screen, and I know Christy will be making some time for your feedback throughout the session today. You can also tweet what you're hearing today. We're going to use the hashtag MSDWBI to take feedback and questions online, and we'll be watching that. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome our presenter, Cristian Nicola.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everybody. So I guess we will be talking today about a new exciting feature from the Vision 2013, the OData Web Services. Basically, it's a very powerful feature, and we will be covering how basically this can help you publish your NAV data to the outside world. So the first thing I wanted to sort of set as as a base for our presentation. The goal here is to quickly illustrate the more common uses of OData. I mean, as Jason mentioned at the beginning, I specialize in business intelligence, which is kind of how I came across with this, as some of the applications, tie into reporting and sort of self-service BI. But I mean, there are many other uses for this. So basically, the idea is that each topic, each special use of it, we could probably make it into an individual presentation. So the goal is to simply sort of give you the breadcrumbs to get a starting point from where you can basically expand and sort of investigate further, depending on which ones you think would be feasible for your company or for your customers and so on. So then, therefore, it's not meant to be a step-by-step training. It's not meant to try to show you how to do it. It's just basically showing you, okay, this is what OData is. These are the main things that you could try, and then sort of using that, we can sort of move on from there. I will be available for any questions during this, as well as after the, if you need any more information about any of the particular topics that I will be touching. There will be moments when I guess we will be talking about something a little bit more technical, or at least feels technical, but I'll try to keep it at a business level throughout most of the presentation. So with that being said, we'll start with a little bit of both propaganda and I guess some boring technical things, which I promise will be only 2 slides of it, and then we can get into the good stuff. So what is OData? Basically, OData is short for Open Data Protocol, and this is basically a definition that I took from Microsoft's website for OData. So the Open Data Protocol is an open protocol for sharing data. It provides a way to break down data silos and increase the share value of data by creating an ecosystem in which data consumers can interoperate with data producers in a way that is far more powerful than currently possible, enabling more applications to make sense of a broader set of data. I guess this says pretty much the same thing as I said, how easily to publish your data to the outside world. So this is basically kind of their official definition. The next slide covers some of the more sort of theoretical definitions for why you should use OData. So the first part here, OData provides a uniform way to expose, structure, query, and manipulate data. Also provides a uniform way to represent data format, allowing computers to know more about the data types, data relationships, and structure of the data. Okay, what this means, I guess, in plain English is the way I kind of viewed this. I mean, the way you guys can think of OData is basically, to a certain extent, it's SQL querying for the web. So basically, this is exactly what they're trying to say here. The idea is that generally they're trying to provide basically a way for various applications to sort of access data silos that you have currently within your organization in a sort of generic way, and usually via the web, instead of trying to use specialized direct access via regular SQL querying. So the simple comparison is this is SQL over the web. That's how I like to call it. Second part is basically sort of the theoretical part of basically why we're doing this. Choosing to export your data as OData, you tap into a large ecosystem that can target the data set with any modifications. You can also tap into an ecosystem of developers, since a lot of developers already know how to target an OData API, and they won't have to learn anything new to get going to your data set. So basically, this one of the options before of accessing sort of remotely or basically in platform independent way the data from your data silos was to use web services. The problem with web services is, and as any person that has tried to program something like that, is that every single data set that you wanted to make available to everybody basically had to be a conversation between both you as the producer as well as the counterparty as the consumer, and you had to predefine together the way you're going to access it, what technology you're going to use, what will be the format that you're going to provide the data. Even more after that was the fact that you actually had to, if anything changed in the data set, then you had to go and redo your programming, and you had to basically talk again with the counterparty. The point of OData is standardizing that whole communication process and the way you present the data, so that in theory, basically, you can independently make available certain data sets within your organization, and other people can basically consume them without necessarily being any conversation between you and the consumer. And also the other thing is basically both Microsoft as well as now, there are things that are basically being available in Java and everything else, and we're going to cover that a little bit as a topic further down. There's a lot of standard ways that you can actually access an OData API, which means basically developers can come into this with just leveraging their own skills that they already have versus trying to learn something new. Anyway, this was pretty much the last theoretical and boring slide. So we will basically move on now to sort of the important part. So in order to create, as I mentioned, OData is a new feature in NAV 2013, and basically in order to create an OData feed, you can use pages and queries. Pages for anybody that is using 2009, you're familiar with it. Basically, that's the role teller client way of the equivalent of forms, but for the role teller client. Queries, so basically existed in 2009 as well. Queries is a brand new object type that is actually available in 2013 only. So it kind of mimics a little bit the SQL query, so it's a really cool feature onto its own. But then both these two features can be expanded to basically publish OData feed outside. So basically, at this point, what we're going to do, we're going to jump into Navision and just show you how to basically create a quick data feed within, how to set up a query. We're going to use query as an example, and then how do we publish that as an OData in NAV. Okay, so I will have to switch to my desktop. Give me 1 second. So what we have here is basically this is in NAV 2013, for those of you who haven't seen it before, there are two parts. There's the Dynamics NAV development environment and then the actual role teller client, which is the only client these days, so that's basically just a client. It's being called that. The development environment is essentially what we used to know before as the classic client, but right now you cannot actually see any data anymore. You basically can only do the development here. So as I mentioned, basically the two ways that you can actually start defining what you want to make available as a data set from your Navision database, basically there are the pages, and then also there is this new object called queries. So queries, it's a pretty straightforward thing. If you've ever done a report in Navision or a data port, it just basically allows you to select the tables and the fields. So we're just going to go through one simple example right now. So the way to do it is when you try to create a new query, just say design. So you have to select the data source that you want to get the data from. So for instance, let's say we want to get data from the customer. Once we do that, basically we can actually go here and say, okay, you can actually go in there and say, okay, what do I want to get from the customer? I want to get my customer name, number. I want to get my customer name. I want to say get my customer city. And I guess, I don't know, say county or something. So those are kind of like county, which basically is the state. So this is pretty much all you have to do to set up a query. So basically then we can just save it, and we can say 50,007 customer list. Customer list. Okay, so then if we take a look at this, basically just to understand like what queries are, if we run this, and I mean why this is an exciting thing just on its own, if we run the customer list at this point, basically we can see that we get all these results. They can be exported to Excel and to Word. So this query feature is actually integrated. It can be used in coding, in Navision programming, so it can be used as a data source for various programming. And I'm pretty sure, and it's my hope, and I guess my bet that Navision will actually build a lot more functionality on top of it in 2014 and so on. The cool thing about this also is that basically that means you can actually set up data sets that basically will be consistent both inside your application by basically making some definitions of how your data set and what do you want to see, both internally as well as externally. In order to publish a data set, all you have to do is basically just go here to the web services and just add it to the list of web services available. So you go in here and you say, I want to publish query 50,007. Okay. Oops, I need another 0 in there. 50,007, okay. And basically we'll just call it cost list. Hopefully I don't have another one like that. Okay, customer list. If I could type, would be even better. And then we just publish it to the web. Okay, so by simply doing this, now this particular data feed is actually available to the world. So in order to actually see this, just like with the web services, there's an IP address that you can actually go and connect as your web access to it. So for instance, what you can do is just go, and that's the address to go to it, and we'll just take a look at our customer list. So basically, this is creating, and this is the actual raw data that is being sent once you create this. I mean, I know it looks a little bit scary and everything, but I mean, if you sort of ignore a lot of the other stuff in there, you can actually see they have customer number, customer name, customer the customer city here, and the state that it's coming from. So basically, all of a sudden, by just simply taking that simple step, this can actually be accessible from all these other applications. I mean, we'll go through them, and that's going to make a lot more sense. All right, so going back to that, this is, I guess, one other thing I want to show about queries before we move on. The cool thing about queries is the following. Basically, what we can do is we can actually use flow fields. This is one of the things that was not possible if you're trying to use SQL or something like this. So if we, for instance, if we want to just publish also like the sales dollars, so we can actually publish sales dollars here. By doing this, and by the way, all I had to do was just sort of add it there. If I go and refresh here, just to take a look at it, sorry. Now all of a sudden, you notice here that we actually have the sales dollars as well. So this is, I think this is like one of the coolest features that they put into queries and via data is the fact that you can actually go in there and add, sort of flow fields, which makes it a lot easier to use than normal Navision logic. Okay, we'll go back to the slides now. So basically, this was just a very quick example. I mean, just there are some features, and I'll try to cover some of them in terms of what queries can do that are useful for data, but we'll use them as we use the other examples. So how to consume more data, and we kind of already jumped in a little bit into the first one, Internet Explorer, Excel, SSRS, custom applications. So basically, there are many applications, and these are the ones that we can cover. I'm going to go a little bit quick through the Internet Explorer just to share a couple of things, and then we'll be doing Excel, SSRS, and then just some samples on the .NET. So before that, let's just play a little bit more with the Internet Explorer. One thing I wanted to show to you guys is that I actually have, I think one of the cool things about this, everything that I just set up in the first example that I showed you, that was locally. So basically, I set up the OData feed, and it was accessible locally on the same computer that I had it. However, I actually have set up currently a public web address with a server in the cloud that basically is publishing the same, is publishing some feeds that I've already created. So basically, if we take a look at it, see it's a public IP, it's basically over the web, and it's simply, you can set up a username and password, and then once you get in, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so basically once you get in, it would actually automatically list the various data feeds that I have set up on my cloud server. So So I mean, this was one of the things that I wanted to mention in terms of this is actually pretty cool. The fact that basically you can do this outside of your sort of internal network, not necessarily just something that you can do internally among your users. So obviously, this doesn't necessarily require to be on the same network as where the SQL Server is. So and it's relatively fast to access. It's basically the query engine the data being based on query engine. The query object actually uses the updated engine in terms of working with SQL that they've actually introduced in 2013 behind the scenes, and basically it has a more efficient way of reading data from the vision than Web Services does. Just a quick one. I don't necessarily want to get too much into this because I guess it feels somewhat technical, but you remember this was saying that it's a generic way. We had the definition of OData as a generic way of defining what data you have access to. So the first simple thing is at the entry point of that, we actually have various feeds. So here, this is a list of salespeople. This is a list of sales. The list of my companies, GL entries, detailed customer ledger entries, and so on. So I mean, basically, this is one thing. The other thing that I was talking about, like making this generic, you can actually basically see the definition, and people don't necessarily have to talk to you. So that was the idea. If we take a look at the actual definition, as if these were tables, basically each of the feeds that I have in that list basically is predefined within the actual OData engine. So basically, people don't have to call you. So like, for instance, if you make available the list of your customers, people don't have to call and say, hey, what is in that feed? They can already by themselves query and find out that these are the fields that you're providing for this particular feed, and these are the data types for them. In terms of also, I told you guys that basically this is, in a way, you can think of this as being a, sort of a SQL on the web. One cool thing that I want to show, I mean, again, I don't expect most people to basically to do this manually, to use this, but I mean, just to sort of illustrate what are the features that are there. GL entries. So for instance, this is actually a dump of the GL entries from that database that I have up in the cloud. So I mean, I have just some basic things: GL account, the document number, the amount, the quantity on it, and everything else. One of the things that you can actually do in here is you can actually start putting you can actually do filtering and sorting. So for instance, here, what I've just done, it's hard to see here, but basically you can actually have a language that you can put in filters. So I said in here, I want the top 2 records, and I want to have them ordered by amount. Basically, this way, instead of having the entire list, which I think it's about 2,000 records or something like this, I only get the top two records with the amounts. So I mean, as you can see, all this language and the querying and everything else is actually built into the OData engine. While the quick way to show you these features is basically through the Internet Explorer. These features are available in any application, and I think this gives you an idea of the way you can actually expand this and the things that you would be available to do in more user-friendly environments. Anyway, I guess we'll move on now to Excel and just sort of illustrate some of the applications, and then we'll show we'll show more user-friendly ways of reading these things later on. Okay. So we'll move on to the next application, which is basically OData Services in Excel. So basically, this is kind of what I mentioned at the beginning in me coming across this topic was basically part of linking with a new add-on that is available by Microsoft. It's a free add-on called PowerPivot. So in Excel 2010, there's only PowerPivot. And it's not built into the application. It's actually an add-on that you have to download from Microsoft. It's just basically a separate thing, but it's free, and it's made by Microsoft. Basically, PowerPivot is an add-on for self-service BI. It allows you to define some data models, and it allows you to build, basically on-the-fly reports and pivot tables and various user-driven analysis. It's basically meant to be sort of a, poor man's BI for people that, for power users of Excel. In Excel 2013, they have actually expanded on that. So you have PowerPivot again. This time is actually comes standard. Well, there are some things about certain versions, and there are some articles on msdynamicsworld.com about what version of Excel you have to get this. But I mean, it's still free. It's just a matter depending on which version you buy and how you buy it. And then this other thing is Power View, which is basically a visualization tool that can be put on top of the data sets from PowerPivot to basically do some nice looking reports. What we're going to use for our demonstration today is basically Excel 2010 and just basically with PowerPivot, just to show the basics of it. Okay. Give me 1 second. All right. So now what we're going to do is the following. So if we open up Excel, once you download and install PowerPivot, you will get a tab over here on the top that basically will allow you to go into the PowerPivot window. So once we go in there, basically we can go PowerPivot window, because basically, as I said, it's a little bit of a different, it's a separate application from Excel, and this is where you get to define your, basically your data model. So what we want to do is the following. Let me just get my base point. The idea is that this allows you to get your data from various data sources. So, here you can actually still get your data sources from Access, from SQL Server, from Analysis Services, or PowerPivot. Just to show, a quick point, if you were to do SQL, PowerPivot in itself works against SQL. So, since I'm a big proponent of this, I definitely recommend you guys give that a try, if you're not yet on 2013 right now, just for the PowerPivot thing. But, one thing that I wanted to basically sort of, showcase is this. If you were to do SQL, there's a couple of things. One, once you sort of try to connect, the problem is the following. What you have here is now you have all the tables in the vision. It's very unwieldy to work with. If you guys I don't know how much you guys are familiar with this concept, but on the SQL end, basically any individual company on the division side actually ends up creating basically one table specifically. So for instance, if you had 3 companies, there would be, there would be 3 different customer tables, right? So you got Kronos Canada, this is the demo database. You got Kronos Canada, Kronos Mexico. So that's 3 different tables that you have right there. The names are not the friendliest. Also, the other thing is, as you start going through this, obviously, then you start, then you have to take a look at the fields, and it's a lot more complicated. So if I want to look at this, I will never probably need all the fields. In the vision tables, as you can see here, there's a lot of fields in here. And the idea is, again, this being in memory, if nothing else, you don't want to have anything that you don't need, simply because it just basically will slow down your reports. And the other disadvantage is because the flow field is sort of a application feature rather than a database feature, the flow fields will not be available on the SQL end. Again, the reason I did this, obviously, if you try to find stuff, it's a lot harder. You have to go through all this. Now, the difference is the following. If we want to get data from OData, so you will choose this option called from data feeds. And if you put in the address where your data is available, all of a sudden you will see the difference. Basically, since OData allows you to control what is being made available to your users, there's a couple of things. One, you only get whatever you've made available to the users instead of basically everything there. So that goes both ways. That's both a control as well as a way to make it easy on your users. Basically, you can define one view on a particular table or tables, and then you can actually basically sort of have everybody use the exact same thing. Whereas with SQL, everybody will have to start from scratch. Also, the other thing is, if we take a look at the customer list that we created here, the only columns that we get in here are the columns that we published. So instead of getting an entire, long list, the only things that you get are the ones that you've already published. And, on top of everything else, you get to see your sales details and everything else. Now, before I choose one here, I just wanted to show you another feature of queries that I'm going to use in this. So one of the queries that I have developed, so remember, originally we developed one which basically was just one table and just some simple, straightforward fields from it. For instance, if you want to do something a little bit more advanced, we have sales details here. So this one is a little bit more advanced query. It's still probably pretty familiar to people that are used to doing SQL queries. So basically what I want to do is I want to get data from the salesperson table, from the customer, and the sales invoice line. The core idea here was that basically I want to get my sales details from here, but then basically I want to sort of have them, okay, for each salesperson I want to see what the customers are, and for each customer I want to see the sales details. So you can do this indented thing. Just like in the vision report, if you ever designed one, for each of these data items you get to define, the sell to customer, how do they link together. Also, the other cool thing is you can actually build filters, so you can say I only want to get the items and only when the quantity is different than 0. Also, at the level, and I haven't used this feature here, but just on the query side, at the level here of the query, you can actually define how you want to order it. So basically, you can add fields and the way you want to order this. Also, you can have, and this will be the end result of the SQL. You only get the top X rows. So this allows you a lot of things of basically reducing the data set that you actually make available. So this will be the first one that we will use. So we got sales details, and basically we'll just choose sales details. That's the only thing that we need. We're just going to say that, add it in. And basically what this does is it just adds it up in here in the data feed. So I mean, these are all the records that we have currently. And from here, I mean, at the basic level PowerPivot, from here you can actually go and say, okay, take this data to a pivot table, and then you can start and doing some analysis. Say, these are my salespeople, these are my customers, quantity and amount. So, now you're in Excel. Basically, it's a pivot table. You can start adding charts if you want, whatever else you want to do with this data. This is one of the basic examples of PowerPivot. I know it doesn't seem like a lot because in theory you could probably do this. You could probably do this in many ways when you get just one single thing. But I mean, OData puts them all together, and you don't have to give access to all the fields. One other thing that I thought it was missing, and they actually did do in 2010. So right now you can basically take this data to pivot tables, charts, and a flattened pivot table. In 2013, you can actually take this data straight into Excel, back into Excel here, in just a regular table. So basically it would just be sort of a data dump of this back into Excel. Why do that instead of just basically maybe doing it from here? The difference is the following. You can sort of use that. You can do the refresh here. You can sort of set up some filters here. You can set up some controls, and then basically whatever ends up in the spreadsheet, that's what the users will be using. Now, an extra feature that I just want to show, I mean, this seems pretty straightforward. It's only one table, but an extra feature that I wanted to show from PowerPivot. So, I mean, if we start another one, PowerPivot window. So if we go back to our OData address, and basically what I have right now, and I'll just show to you the definition. So what we have here is the following. We have a SP feed, which is basically just salespeople information. So these are just code, the salesperson code, name, the commission percentage, and if he has an attached to a global dimension one. Obviously, we have our information about customer info here. So this is, the customer number, name, and the state, okay? And then I've created another one, which is a straightforward, simple sales invoice lines. Basically, this is just the information, from the sales in terms of what has been sold, to our customers. If you realize to a certain extent, it's a pretty much similar concept with the one here, except this has all of them together, whereas those are actually disparate elements. So what I'm going to do in PowerPivot here, I'm going to take my salesperson, I'm going to take my customer info, and I'm going to take my sales invoice line. So take all three. So that's the cool thing about it. You can actually, in PowerPivot, you can bring all of them over. And, now you have three different tabs down here. So what you can do now in PowerPivot, and this is basically where the whole self-service BI, and this is where the power of it actually comes, is basically you can start creating relationships. So the idea is the following. The sales invoice line is linked to the customer info table via the customer number, right? So, you can define that relationship. Also, you can define the relationship of basically the customer. Actually, let's see, so I'm missing one thing on the customer. So on the customer, we're missing one thing for illustrating my point, which is I want my salesperson code. So salesperson code. Okay, so basically if we go and save, so no, that's not the one, customer info, if we take the table and take the salesperson code as well, save, just to be sure we'll do a refresh all. Okay. Now, if nothing else, I mean, to me, I think, I know I'm a geek and everything else, but I mean, to me, I think this is an amazing thing. I mean, I just need one extra field in there. I can just go do it. There's no programming or nothing, and it's just available both to this application or any other application I had in mind by just simply going and adding one extra thing in here. I mean, I think that's kind of like amazes me about this particular functionality here. All right, so now the customer basically is linked to the salesperson via the salesperson code. So here we got to define that relationship as well. So we just say create. So there's a relationship. So far, basically that's it. There are other things that you can do. Basically you can actually do calculations. So it pretty much kind of, assumes that, everything that you do, it's meant to be for the columns. I mean, the difference between this and the regular Excel spreadsheet is I can actually say, this column, hold on a second. So this column equals, that's weird, that divided by that. Okay, so as you can see automatically, it actually did the math for all the lines. I mean, here everything is assumed that you actually have trying to define an entire data set. You don't have to go copy down and everything else. I mean, this, I guess, would be basically unit price. Not that we're going to use it, but just I wanted to show one other concept. And here you actually have functions that you can sort of, do a lot more than what I just did as a simple math, but just I wanted to show this little feature. Now, what we can do is if we want to say, okay, fine, we've defined our data set, we know what we want, so now we just want to go to a pivot table. What happens now, it basically comes in with all three data sets that we have here. So what we can do, for instance, we can just say I want to get the customer number analysis. Well, actually, I start with salesperson. It's easier. I want to look at my sales for salesperson, okay? And then basically I want to get quantity and amount. So the cool thing here is even though originally for instance, the sales invoice line does not have all this other information, it does not have a salesperson, by just simply defining that on the PowerPivot in terms of relationship and everything else, I can actually do analysis at this level. Or even anything that it's inherited will go through it. So for instance, I can analyze at the level of the dimensions assigned to my salespeople. So even though this is not here, I can do that. Same way as basically I can bring in my customer and analyze my customer, but even more importantly, I can actually go in there and say I can analyze my sales by state. So even though the state is not here on the sales invoice line, you can actually, by just having all this information coming through and defining the relationships, you can actually do this inherited analysis. So in a version, if you had to do this, you would have to basically program, add the field in sales invoice line, add the, basically add the state, change the posting routine so that it gets populated as you're posting, or at least when you're creating the orders and so on. So it would be a whole bunch of things that you would have to do basically just to get to the same result. Anyway, that's pretty much some of the basics of PowerPivot. I mean, PowerPivot itself can be easily 1 or 2 hour topic as to what else you can do. But I mean, I strongly recommend you guys go and download it in 2010. If you have 2013, I'm pretty much sure that you guys probably going to have it already there, and I definitely think it's worth a look. I guess probably one other quick thing was, let's try something here. Okay, I don't remember if actually this was the one where I used a lot of records. Let's see. So, I mean, this is on my laptop, but I mean, this is 2,000 records and it came through. So, I mean, I guess the other thing that I want to kind of point out, there's 2 things, I mean, as I mentioned, your data engine, the way Navision handles reading the data and everything else, it's already efficient because it's using the latest way that they actually query the SQL database. So, normally this is actually relatively pretty fast. So, I mean, and also as long as you have enough RAM and everything, you can actually do analysis here with millions of rows. Okay, let's minimize this for a second. I guess before we move on to the next one, I don't know if anybody had any questions. I guess I need to scroll through here to see. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, just to reiterate, feel free to enter your questions in the chat or the Q&A box on the right side of the screen. Anytime, really, and but when we're on the slides here is a good time to help give us visibility.
Okay. All right. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna move on to the next quick application. So basically, PowerPivot was a self-service BI, option, but then also, as I mentioned before, you can actually use this with SQL Server Reporting Services. This was actually just a random sort of, lucky concept basically to even find out that can be done. So basically, I think I'll get back to this to explain what Magic Word is. So let's just jump into a SQL Server Reporting Services. Basically, I mean, I think originally I tried to look into this, and okay, OData basically is supposed to be a data source for pretty much, okay, it's in Excel, it's in a whole bunch of other things. So why can't we use this for reporting services? Not that I'm necessarily the biggest fan of it or whatever, but I mean, SQL Reporting Services, a lot of people are looking at it because if you do have the skills for it, it's probably easier to do some reports, some of the nicer reports, a lot easier to do them this way than using, say, role teleclient reporting. So originally I didn't find any option on how to do that, but then basically at last convergence I was able to, catch this little sort of nugget that I could have almost overlooked from Freddie K during one of his sessions. So the idea is, let's say now we have Visual Studio, so you want to do a report. Start a project, and you have a project here. The idea is when you want to create the data source, right? I mean, I was looking the same way as I had in Excel. I'm looking for OData, and I mean, there's no OData here, So I was like, okay, I don't understand how it could not be available. Anyway, so then apparently the way to do this, and you can actually do this, is basically by just going in here and selecting that the data source is XML. And then what you have to do is just give it the address of the data that we're looking for. So I'm going to use my sales details. Sales details. I think it was called details. Nope. What was it called? 1 second. Sales underscore details, of course. So I'm just trying to be lazy here and copy and paste, so that sometimes doesn't work that well. Okay, so going back to our report, all you have to do here is you say, okay, this is where I'm supposed to get it. I mean, I still was kind of, I think I originally tried that part, and basically it didn't seem to work. So I mean, I was kind of, confused as to how XML would work. But anyway, this is basically what you have to do. You just point it as the data source, and that's all you have to do in terms of that. In terms of defining the data set, what you have to do is the following. When you come here at the beginning and you're taking a look at the fields, nothing pops up here because basically it can't read what data provides to start with. But then, and this is what I had on my, my slide, there's this what I call magic word. So there's this combination of things that format, combination of sort of settings that formatted that XML being generated by the OData that was provided by Microsoft. So all you have to do is take that particular magic, so-called magic word as I call it, as all this stuff. I kind of guess what it does, and I wouldn't be able to explain it. And honestly, I don't, it's like one of these things where you don't necessarily need to understand it. As soon as you put that in there, it basically, I guess, cleans up what is being provided by data, and now we have the fields that actually I had in there. So now all of a sudden we actually have access to the data that we wanted. So, simply at this point, it becomes a pure SQL Server Reporting Services, SSRS scenario of just doing, doing a report the same way as before. You have to put this back again. And at this point, I mean, again, I'm not a guru in SQL Reporting Services, so I'm just gonna, quickly go through this, through the wizard. So let's say we want to see our salespeople in the columns, we want to see our customers on the rows, and then we want to see our sale item and quantity and amount, right? So if you go like this, and basically we just say finish, and take a look at the quick report that we've just done. Voila. Basically now you actually have a, SSRS report. I'm sure this is not the best of what your people could do if they know SSRS, but, the whole point here was originally I was not sure, and that the only thing that matters basically is just this thing. So, I mean, as long as you have this, that's all you need to put in there, and then basically it's kind of work. I haven't been able to make it work outside of the network. Like the PowerPivot, I can actually get PowerPivot feeds from my cloud server and it works just fine. Haven't been able to actually get this to work. You saw, I don't know if you noticed when I created this, I said use Windows Authentication, which obviously works if you're on the intranet. Haven't been able to make this part work, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that's just something figuring out permissions and firewall settings and everything else if you really wanted to allow someone to do this kind of stuff, outside of your network. But I mean, as service reports, you might actually just want to keep them inside the intranet anyway. So, I mean, this is pretty much, all I wanted to show here. I wanted to share this. I mean, it was, one of the very little nuggets of, very good presentation from Freddie K last year with like an hour and a half, and, he threw a lot of information. It's sometimes easy to just miss these things. So I hope, this is going to help people. Again, SSRS, I don't recommend to anybody go learn SSRS if you don't already know it, but if you have some skills in it, you can definitely do some nice and cool reports with it. So that's pretty much all on this. Okay, going back, so it is. I mean, there will be a recording available, and you can go back to and get you can write this down, or I mean, if you want, feel free to email me, and I'll have my email address at the end, and then I can sort of send this to you. Okay, so now the next one is basically these were some of the standard. This was some of the standard features. Everything that we covered so far, some of the standard applications that you can actually use out of the box with OData. Now, from here on, basically, and that was the point of the, that boring theoretical stuff at the beginning, there's a lot of things that can be done using custom programming. So, for the moment, what I will be doing is basically I've developed a quick .NET application that allows you to sort of read, more user-friendly the information being provided on, being provided in a data feed. I've done some quick, basically I've done some quick development with mobile as well, just some, proof of concept stuff. So I mean, you can definitely use Java and Apple and stuff. The iPad and getting on iPad, iPhone. Believe it or not, I tried Windows Phone 7 and actually didn't work very well, and then basically, I'm hoping that Windows Phone 8 is actually much better from that perspective. Also, like, this is a link that will be available in the recording, and you can go to it, or, I mean, you can start looking LightSwitch and OData. LightSwitch is sort of a new rapid development environment available in Visual Studio, and, I mean, if you just take a look at this one, it will actually show you some really quick and nice business line applications that you can develop very quickly by just using OData and LightSwitch. It's actually pretty cool. I definitely recommend for you to look, and it's just one of the many examples. I mean, basically, there are many ways you can do this. So for now, I'm just going to show what I've done with a Silverlight application, just using OData. Okay, one second. Okay, so basically this is available on my, sort of within my website, Dynamics BI Guide, and then OData Explorer. This actually, if you want to try it online, if you create your own OData feed, you can actually use this application that I put there. I mean, it's available to anybody. It's just dynamicsbiguide.com OData Explorer. So what we want to take a look here is basically, a way to navigate and read basically read what is available. So if I take a look at my feed that is out in the cloud, you still have to do your username and password. Okay. So, what I was saying about, for instance, this is an example of I showed you guys what the raw data being provided by OData is. But if I want to just go through this and just navigate through this, basically this is the list of my customers. Let me sort of see if I can I make this smaller? No. So this is a list of my customers and everything that I made available from them. This is a list of my GL entries. This is an interesting one because basically one of the things with OData is you can enable paging. So what you're seeing here right now is basically the first 1,000 records from my from my table. I think I have about 2,000 records. So this was the first 1,000, and then I get the next button, and then you can do this. So, this is a thing that if you have an application that's trying to read this, you can enable paging, so you're not basically sort of, swamping and maybe making your application crash by getting, if you're looking at 100 to 100,000 records, you might want to decide that you want to get X amount of them. But I mean, this is something that basically it's a generic application. It's not specific, but I mean, you can see how this could be developed in something more. Basically, this is a generic one that allows to see any feed in here, and you can see it. You can see what's in there, when it's a lot easier to read than that XML file that we had there. If we take a look at this, for instance, we have document number, the quantities, and everything else. So I guess that's pretty much it. It's just I want to show one of the things that can be done. You can imagine that this could easily be done into sort of a more of a, if you decided that you wanted to make something specific for a particular application. This will show the data for anything, basically any kind of data feed, simply because it has just this table grid. But you could definitely develop your own where it's sort of designed specifically, say, for reading your salespersons or your customers and basically the information about them. I guess quickly, one thing that I wanted to show, I mean, it's not a feature on the OData from NAV 2013, but I mean, basically, I think it's just cool, and I'm hoping one day they will allow for that. So Northwind is basically Northwind is the demo database that comes in with SQL. If basically that's where you get taught on if you really want to learn. And Microsoft has made this available via an OData feed publicly to people. So if you go and take a look at this, it's similar to what I had before. You have your customer information, everything else. But remember when I told you guys at the beginning that in my mind, OData is like SQL on the web. The idea is in this one, and that was not, and I understand why Micro and Navision didn't put that, at least hopefully maybe somewhere down the line. You can actually define relationships. So here, basically, in their OData feed, they define that the customer is actually linked to the order data feed, which is over here, right? So these are the orders that, that are within the Northwind database. So if I go back to my customer, by the fact that I have that relationship, I can say, okay, for this guy, say for Ana Trujillo, what are her orders? So if I click here, it's actually going to show me what are her orders and only her orders. Now, Ana Trujillo, I guess basically there's Ana Trujillo, the orders are associated with these employee IDs. Well, looking at this employee ID doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So if I navigate on that link, the employee ID number 7 is actually Robert King. Again, now you can go back and say, hey, Robert King, what are his orders? And now you get this. So this is one of the features that is missing from, the OData. And, I mean, I think that, I hope eventually they will put it in. But, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's even more than what you can do out of the box. I mean, if you ever end up doing something on your own with OData, then this would be part of what should be implemented in there. Okay, so that was an example. Going back to our slides here, let me see what we have next.
Christy, there was a question going back a few minutes on PowerPivot compared to Jet Reports, and maybe you could talk about it a little more broadly too, compared to other third-party solutions.
Okay. Well, it is the following. So basically, that's a good point that I actually have a slide where I say that PowerPivot versus Jet Reports. So the difference is the following. I mean, Jet Reports, the regular Jet Reports, the Essentials and Jet Reports, I guess, I don't remember what they call it now, Essentials, I think. So you got the Jet Reports Express and Essentials, which is basically the classic Jet Reports, not the BI solution. They basically, at the end of the day, they are a connector that just allows you to extract the data and extract the data from the vision and bring it into bring it into Excel. They actually added something that, this is kind of like one of these overlapping things that Microsoft does, where, they have this table builder thing where you can choose which table, which fields, and how do you link them. So, I mean, as you've seen the query right now, you kind of realize it's pretty much the same thing. To me, the reason I think OData and PowerPivot together work better is simply because, you get to define, as I said before, control as well as, I guess one version of the truth kind of thing. You get to define the feeds on the vision side. With your reports, every time you do a new report, unless you start copying from the previous one, you will have to say which tables, which fields, and move on from there. Whereas basically, and also you will have to know which tables and which fields. Whereas basically, one thing I show in the query is you can rename the tables, you can rename the fields to make it user-friendly. So you can already give the user the end data set that he needs to work with. Also, basically, again, Jet Reports is a connector, brings data into Excel. PowerPivot takes that data. There's a apparently pretty powerful engine behind the scenes that sort of calculates and brings things together and mashes it and everything else. Basically, and you can do all in-memory BI. Basically, you can do all that pivot table, all that analysis. You can define measures, calculated measures, and everything else. And lastly, in terms of performance, I mean, it's still more data than PowerPivot, but basically the idea is the following. As I mentioned, Jet Reports basically in 2013 they actually connect via web services. So they request via web services. So that means they have to go get the records, and they use the sort of normal way of accessing data, whereas OData basically, first of all, is using, from a division perspective, is using that new sort of querying engine, metadata querying engine. I'm not sure I understand it, but anyway, my understanding is that the new way they do this whenever they use query is much better than, the regular web service where you're taking one at a time. Because the advantage with the query is you can define, and that's why it's probably easier for them. You can say from the beginning why you want, and then SQL can define it too. So it's much more natural with the way SQL queries used to work. So that's basically part of it. And I've actually last week I helped someone that already has Jet Reports, a customer, and basically to transition to PowerPivot. The problem is, as whoever has used this over time, their problem was the following: that the amount of records that they were getting basically would bog down the report that run either very long or basically would just crash. PowerPivot were able to bring in, sort of, I think they had for a quarter 1 million item ledger entries or something like this. So we're able to bring those in and basically just, generate the report that we needed to do. So, I mean, those are kind of some of the things that I think, sort of separate the two. Hopefully that answers the question. I mean, if you want, we can look further at that. So, all right. Now, I guess, Jason, do you have any other questions, or that was it?
That's it for now.
There's one here. How do you know filter by company? Is it Cronus US or Cronus? Oh, okay. Well, basically, it depends on which company. It depends on which company you define the feed. So that will be, so that's one thing I don't think I haven't been able to figure that out. I'm not sure that you can sort of put them all together into one. So basically, the web service list is by company. So basically, wherever you publish it, that's where it will be available. So hopefully that answers that question. Also, by the way, another thing, since we are talking about filters with data, another cool thing about that OData stuff is that you can actually program it, versus like, say, the J reports or any other way of accessing even SQL and direct SQL and everything else, is that you can actually I play with it and you can put some code in there. So for instance, you could define a data feed that reads your sales details, either from the item ledger entry or from the sales invoice line. And then based on the user that is making the request, you can program it so it automatically filters it by that particular salesperson. So, you could almost make it dynamic from that perspective, basically, in the sense of that, you could put some really cool stuff there, some cool logic that allows you to control it without having to create, say, again, if you want to give it to your salespeople, you obviously don't want one salesperson to see what the other one has, and I mean, that's the other thing, by the way, in terms of fields, when you get access. So that's the idea. You can control which records they see. Also, you can control which fields. I mean, if you give them access, they have to a table, they will have access to all the fields, which means you're going to have access to the cost information as well as the sales information. Whereas with OData, if you give them an OData feed, they're going to have access to only the fields that you want, which for a salesperson, it may just be the sales amount, but not the actual cost. Anyway, OData is pretty cool, and yes, we've talked about standard. Standard is only basically with 2013 out of the box. In case you guys are interested in trying to do this with all the Navision versions, it can be done. It will not be a Microsoft thing, but basically, I mean, depending on your timeline of upgrading or just simply just want to try it now. As I said, it can be done via custom data development. So, everything that we talked so far are consuming OData feeds, basically consuming this the data provided by OData. But I mean, there's there are sort of data libraries and there's tutorials on how to basically get an OData feed out of pretty much any SQL database. There's also out of any other data storage. It's not just SQL, but I would imagine that's probably the first place you want to start. If you look up on OData.org, you'll see some examples. If you just want a specific data feed, if you just want to get, say, the sales invoice line out to the GL entry, it's pretty quick development. I mean, you could do the basics of it to generate that OData feed in probably 4 hours of data development, maybe less depending on your skill set. But I mean, the idea is that then that just means next time you want to get another feed, so let's say that was for the GL entry, if you want to do the item ledger entry, then you'll have to program again. So that's kind of like one of the downsides of doing that versus what 2013 does out of the box with that nice setup where you don't have to program every time. So, I mean, I kind of didn't like that. So basically you can actually, and I ended up doing some kind of proof of concept just out of curiosity to see if it's doable, but it's definitely a much bigger programming job. You can actually build one that is generic, but it's not a straightforward thing. So, I mean, I ended up making something like that, which is actually seems to work pretty well. And, I mean, because the engine for that, the whole OData logic is based on, it seems to be pretty actually good. So, that's a possibility for 2009 and below, and, you don't have to be on, 2013. So just wanted to put it out there for people that maybe are not considering to be there today, or not in the near future. Okay. So just to revisit a little bit, why use OData? So as I kind of kept talking over and over, one central place for defining external data access. Also, don't forget, I mean, I concentrate on queries because I think it's a really cool thing in 2013. But you can also use pages. Now, what does that mean? The pages are basically the same things that your Navision users are seeing. So you can make those available to everybody else, which again comes back to the central place concept that you only define once and consume many times, right? So basically, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Basically, what your internal users see, it's the same thing that your external users see. We kind of covered this when we compared JET to this record table and field level access control. You can build in some logic in terms of filter, either hard-coded filters or basically so they can only see certain things. You could basically filter so, you can make an OData feed that it's only for department A. So then you can filter that anything they're exporting is based on that department. Table, you can say which tables you want to get access. It's not like you give them access to all the tables, and especially fields. So basically, if you take the customer table and you give them number, name, and state, that's the only thing that will have access through that whole feed. Whereas if you give them access to the customer table, read access on the SQL end, then basically that will be, they will have access to any field on it. In 2013, no programming needed for adding new data collections. You saw how fast and quick and easy it is to just go add another field if you need one. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to reprogram. You don't have to recompile anything. You don't have to do anything else. As we covered, access from a wide variety of applications, both standard and custom, both local and web-based. And we kind of covered this at this point, better alternative to JetExpress and web services for reading data, because basically I think it's faster, and it allows you to consume this in many more places than you could with, say, JetExpress, which just tied in down in Excel. And as I said, I mean, in 2010 with PowerPivot, I still see a place where you could sometimes need JetExpress if you just want a data dump, right? Just simply because if you just want a certain number of records, which is kind of what my customer wanted, but we still kind of figured out how to do that as well with the flattened pivot table. If you just want a list and then do something with it after the fact, you kind of, sometimes that's not easy. Flattened pivot table is not the best thing in the world, versus the actual, list of the records. But, in 2013, you have that option where basically you can actually get it just into Excel as it is and then just do whatever it was that you're planning to do with it. Okay, one limitation. I know I've been talking about how great OData is. So OData versus Standard Web Services. Okay, in 2013, OData is a read-only data source where Standard Web Services are read and write. Out of the box, OData, generic OData, is actually both read and write. So you can read records and you can write them back, okay? In the version 2013, OData is a read-only, whereas with web services, obviously you can read records, but you can also modify them. I kind of understand the logic for Microsoft. I mean, at the end of the day, like if you think about that sales invoice line, the sales details data feed that I created, I mean, that's 3 different tables: salesperson, customer, and sales invoice line. And honestly, I don't think any of those tables is something that you would want to have modified. So there are workarounds, and I mean, you probably program something, and I'm actually trying to figure out a way to do that to sort of add to, to this feature in 2013 to be able to write back as well. But I mean, out of the box, I mean, this is really meant for consuming data, not necessarily to try to do data entry as well, at least out of the box anyway. And I think that's pretty much it, and amazingly, I'm somewhat on time. This is the official OData Microsoft website. So this is just generic information, has nothing to do with Dynamics or anything else. This is where you can go read more about it. You can, if you want to get your developers onto it, there's a lot of samples there of how to do things. You can read a little bit more on my website, and also feel free to contact me anytime if you have any kind of questions about this. I think other than that, I guess, Jason, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so we'll make this a last call for questions anyone might have on the line right now. You also see Christy's email address there, so obviously feel free to reach out to him for things further down the line or access to the slides. Just as a reminder, we also recorded today's session, and we'll be making it available online for anyone who missed the session live or had audio problems.
Okay.
So this is the last call for questions. I'm not seeing anything else on my side, Christy.
No, I don't see here anything either, yeah. So I think we're good for now, and again, I guess feel free to email if you have more.
Thanks so much for attending today. There will be a quick survey that pops up with 3 questions after we end, and we would obviously really appreciate your feedback. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Bye.
Thank you, Christy. Bye.